So let me get this straight. You went on a trip for 15 months and you still managed to come home with money? How the hell do you do that? That is what I came up against from so many people when I came home. They want to know all the secret ways of how I made it work, traveling long term, and being able to afford all of this and still come home with money. So yeah, in this video, which is part 2, I'm going to be sharing with you what I did on my trips, different tactics and whatnot to make that money stretch throughout my trip and still be able to come home with money instead of being home in debt. So hi there. If you don't know me, my name is Jen. I am the owner of Launch Your Travels, where I teach people how to plan and take their own trips. I'm also hosting my own group tours that are going to be starting in 2022 now. So in the last video, I went over all the ways that I ended up saving money and paying off my debt and being able to afford all of my travel adventures. Now, if you haven't seen that one yet, go back, watch that. Not right now, but go back after this video and you'll be able to get a bunch of tips on how to save more money for your traveling. Now, the way I started out this trip was I started in Canada. I'm obviously from Canada, and I was really nervous to go on this trip. I've never done anything like this before, and I thought being in Canada, it would be familiar to me. I was taking a road trip, so I had the comfort of my car. I was able to pack a lot more than I should. And I also thought if I really hated it, it wasn't going to be so bad to just drive back home and find another job. But in the end, I ended up starting to love it before I left Canada, and I continued on. Now, Canada is not the most economical way to start a long-term trip. It's not the cheapest place to travel, but for my sanity and for my fears, that trumped anything. So that is why I started my trip in Canada. Now, the first few weeks, I was able to save some costs. I had traveling partners for the first, I think it was 3.5 weeks. My mom came with me on the road trip across Canada. We actually went across America and then up to Canada on certain areas. And then we ended up in Quebec. Now, from there, I met another friend of mine who joined me in Montreal for a week as well. Now, once they left, I was able to save money because we split costs on gas and also on accommodations and also food. So I was able to split those costs with someone else, which makes it a lot easier. Now, the first few weeks after those first few weeks, I made mistakes because I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't have so much of a plan, except that I knew I wanted to road trip through the Maritimes and Newfoundland. And I kind of had a timeline on how long I was going to do, but I didn't really know how long I wanted to do it for. I was just letting the road take me where it wanted to. Now, when I started doing this, so I was coming from Quebec and I was going into New Brunswick. Now, I didn't really have a route planned out. I kind of knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't have stopping points. And that's one of the things that really tripped me up at the beginning was not having properly planned out stopping points because it got really expensive because I wasn't going to be around any like major places that has either Airbnb or hostels, which are like the lower cost options to be able to get your accommodations. So I was staying in hotels and bed and breakfasts and usually like at least $100 a night. And you cannot sustain $100 a night when you're traveling long term. So I was getting really nervous that I wasn't doing this right and I was spending all this money. Now, another thing that I brought with me was a tent. So I had a hatchback and this tent attached to the back of my car. And then I was able to have the tent and I was able to sleep on a mattress in the back of my car. Now, when I did this, I did it once. I didn't do it as often as I thought I would for a few reasons. The one time I did do it, I went to a national park. I'm used to camping in national parks or, parks that have like actual campsites and people around. I am not used to, going off and finding free spots to camp and, kind of set up my own tent and just live in the wilderness. That was too scary for me at the beginning for sure. So I didn't do that. So I camped once in New Brunswick and it was nice. Camping by yourself is a whole different adventure. It got kind of boring, especially when in New Brunswick, since mostly everyone speaks French there, which I didn't realize. And so they weren't so friendly, and I didn't meet very many people there. Now, the other thing that I realized is camping, especially if you're going to national parks, was way more, not way more, but was as expensive, if not a little bit more, than going into a hostel. So choosing between a hostel and camping is great to get out in nature, but the ease of everything just is so much easier when you're in a hostel. You don't have to set up a tent and set up your whole campsite. You don't have to cook all your food on the fire, and you don't have to chop wood, and you don't have to, there's so many different things. Washing dishes, going to the bathroom, like all those things just become a lot more when you're camping. And so if I was going to choose, I was going to go stay at a hostel or a more inexpensive Airbnb. So I learned that early on, and I just kind of, packed my tent with me everywhere and didn't use it. From there, I started hitting bigger cities. And from these cities, I was able to find hostels and Airbnbs. Now, with the Airbnbs, I didn't get the place to myself. I chose the staying with the host, which brings down your cost a lot more. So I was able to split that cost down, staying with the host. You also had in both places built-in people to talk to and also get more information from. Now, this is one of the things that I built my trip along with from then on. Once I got into hostels and started meeting other travelers and other people moving around, and just even the locals there, I would get, anytime I met someone and heard where they had been and places that I was looking at going to, I got them to write down all the recommendations, where they stayed, what they did, what was worth it, what was not worth it. You can tell pretty quickly when you're talking to someone else if you're going to kind of like the same things. Now, you want to take the recommendations from people that kind of are similar to yourself, and then you'll be able to know that you're going to be pretty much liking it as well. So I always kept a running list of all these recommendations. This way I was able to stay in some more unique places that I may not have even known of. And I was also able to get recommendations for things to not really bother purchasing. So one of those really cool accommodations that I stayed in was a hospital hostel in Newfoundland. And the experience, because I was there late shoulder season. I was the only one there in a big empty hospital. So a little scary sometimes, but I had the guy on speed dial if I needed to. But it was so cool, because I would not have known about that place if I didn't ask someone in Prince Edward Island. So when I started to go and meet people and everything, I always got their contact details. Anyone that I really enjoy spending time with or did things with, I got their contact details. Now, this is for later on in your travels and whatnot, because you never know when you're going to be in that person's country, and you're going to be able to either meet up with them and they can show you around the town, or they may offer for you to stay with them as well. And that happened to me a few times throughout this trip as well. I met people in Canada and early on in my trip, and then I was able to stay with them in countries that I went to later on in my trip. So it definitely cuts down those costs, because then you don't have to be paying for those accommodations when you have those contacts with you. Now, one of the things that I did do before I left Canada was I sold my car. This was a bit of a process for sure, but I was able to sell my car and then put that money back into my travel fund as well. Now, another thing that also came up, started to come up quite a bit, along with meeting the people that you met and staying with them, but it was also meeting friends of friends. So when you start posting on social media or people hear that you're traveling and where you are, they tend to know people in those areas, and they basically do an introduction to you and you're able to meet up with them. I met up with a few people and I was able to stay with them, and I went to places I didn't think I was going to go to, had an amazing time. And then I was also able to stay with friends that I knew for a long time as well, that I never really get to see either. So use your friends, not use your friends. Use your contacts to be able to go and see people, see who they know, who they think you're going to get along with, and see how that can help you fund a little bit of your trip. Even if it's not staying with them, getting them to take you around town and showing you some of the more local stuff that probably doesn't cost as much. Do that and see what else that is out there. Now, next, one of the things that I did, because when you are traveling, one of the big things that you do is there's three major things that are going to cost you money. The first thing is going to be all your flights, travel, all your transportation costs. Then it's going to be your accommodations, and then it's going to be food. And all of these things, when you're traveling on your own, you can't really split because you have no one to split it with. There were times that I did meet other people in hostels and different on tours and stuff like that. And I ended up traveling with them for, sometimes it was a couple days, sometimes it was a couple months. So we were able to split costs, maybe get some better accommodations and split that cost. So it helped out a lot if you keep your mind open to meeting new people and seeing if you guys are traveling to around the same area, and then you guys can travel together. Now, what I did with the transportation is I used travel credit cards a lot. So when I did book things, so in my last video, you knew that I collected points and travel rewards on all my credit cards. Now, then I was able to use that on these trips. So I was able to use it for any more expensive flights. So I wouldn't use it on the smaller flights. I would use it for kind of the big flights that I would be taking out and about. Then I was also looking at cheap airlines. So from Canada, I went over to London. I stayed in London for 2 weeks and I stayed with a friend. So I was able to afford that quite easily. And then from there, I went over to Asia. Now, that is the big thing. When you are traveling for a long time, you want to go to those places around the world where it is a lot more inexpensive to where you're from and to what your money is worth. Going over to Asia is a great place because your money goes a lot farther. So I went straight over to Asia. I went to Thailand. I did all over the Southeast Asia. And then I also did up in Nepal, Mongolia, and those places as well. So I was able to get those either free flights, and by free, it's not just like, here's your ticket. You still have to pay some taxes and some fees, but it's significantly less than what you would pay. So I'd use that for those types of bigger flights. Then I'd use the inexpensive, cheap airlines, both huge over in Europe and in Asia. So you're able to get quite a few inexpensive flights and just do little hopper flights in and around the area. The other thing that I would be open to was buses and boats and trains. So any mode of transportation, I kind of like mixing it up and being on different types of transportation just to have the experience. Now, one of the things that I would do is do overnight buses or overnight trains. Now, then that's a double whammy because when you do that, you already have your accommodation paid for that night, but you're also on your transportation taking you to that place that you're going to. So you don't have to pay for an extra accommodation night, which is really nice. Now, from there, your accommodations is going to be another big one. Now, what I did was I stayed mostly in hostels. Now, I know most people have a big about hostels, but hostels have changed the way that you think hostels are. Now, back probably a number of years ago, they were party hostels and everyone just drank and they were young and all of that. There's hostels that broad range. Yes, you can still get those party hostels, but you can also get hostels that are not. You have super stylized hostels that look beautiful, comfortable, safe, clean, and no big parties. With that, you're able to have your breakfast in the morning. A lot of hostels will have a kitchen and they have staples in the kitchen as well. They usually have cereal and stuff like that. So you're able to have some breakfast there for free, depending on the hostel. Now, another thing that I would do is I'd also stay in some fancy hotels. Sometimes you get sick of doing hostel life. And so I want to stay in some fancier hotels. What I did with that is I used my travel rewards. I was able to get free nights, and these are actually free nights at some really nice hotels. So I was able to, have a little break. Another thing that I forgot to say about the hostels is you can get private rooms in the hostels. It's not all dorm rooms. So you can get private rooms. You can get dormitory rooms. Not sure how that's going to work with COVID at the moment. So that may take a while to come back. But you can also get, when you do the dormitory ones, I would go for the smaller room number of people in the room. So I usually get like 4 people to a room, maybe 6. And you can also have female only ones included as well. Now, another thing that I did was I negotiated hotel rates. So if I knew I was going to be staying somewhere, and this is mostly when I was staying in Asia and in different places, when I knew I was going to be staying somewhere for a little bit longer of a time, so maybe 2-3 weeks, I would talk to the hotel. It's usually local hotels that would do it. You don't go to like the Hilton or anything like that. It's the local hotels that you go to, or bed and breakfasts, and you go and let them know how long you're planning on staying, asking how much it is, and seeing if they have a better price, since you're staying for so long, and I've usually been able to negotiate the price down. So I was able to do that. And then I was also able to share the costs, like I said, with other travelers that I traveled with. So that also cut down those costs. Now, after that, you are going to be looking at all of your food costs. Now, food, it depends on how you travel and how you eat when you're traveling. I find I don't eat nearly as much as I do probably when I'm at home, when I'm traveling, because you're so busy doing things. You're doing new things, you're doing walking a lot, and you're just distracted. So you're not always thinking about food. So I would not necessarily eat as often as I would. Then I would also eat a lot of street food. Now, street food doesn't have to be like a street cart or anything like that. This is also kind of like the street food that you would get more in European places, like the places where university kids go, or fast food, and not fast food where it's like McDonald's. Have the local, and where the locals are going for their fast food. It's little mom and pop shops and that. So you can get a wide variety of getting street food. Now, when you go to different places and they have street food, like from carts, and they're cooking it right in front of you, definitely one tip you want to take into account is go to the one that has the longest line. That way, the food is getting turned over really quickly and everyone likes it. So I always choose the ones that have a bigger line. Now, from the street food, I also eat in restaurants, and I also go to grocery stores. So I do a mixture of all three. I look for, sometimes I look for specials for the restaurants, and then especially over in Asia, restaurants really don't cost that much either. Unless you're going to Western style restaurants, they're going to be a little bit more expensive. And I didn't not go to those ones as well. Sometimes you just want some comfort food, but do a mixture of all of it. The groceries also help a lot, especially in Canada and Europe, where you're able to make stuff, especially if you're staying in an Airbnb with a host, or in a hostel, you usually have kitchen space, so you're able to make those things when you get home, or you can also get those grab to go and then just go have a picnic somewhere. So I was able to use all of those things to be able to bring down the costs on what I was spending on food. Now, when I was Another cost that does come into play is your transportation costs within the cities. Now, with these, I usually walk everywhere. I am that type of person where I will walk from one side of the city down to the other side of the city. Not everyone is like that, but I also took a lot of public transportation. I really recommend taking public transportation. It's super easy to do through Google Maps, and it tells you exactly how to do it. It's very, very easy. Now, I would stay away from a lot of taxis, and I would stay away from Ubers, depending, like in Europe. If I did want to take a taxi, an Uber, definitely the way over a taxi. And over in Asia, Ubers and Grabs were very inexpensive. So when I just was lazy, I would take one of those. But those were few and far between the walking and the public transportation. Now for activities, so you want to go out and do everything. What I did here was I determined what I thought was worth it. So what was I looking for, and what do I want out of this experience? Because to me, I don't need to go into every museum. I don't need to go up every monument and do all of those paid experiences. Sometimes, and quite a few, more often than not going into those experiences is just as good. I'm not a huge museum fan. There are some museums that I definitely go to, but I determine if it's worth it to me, and then I maybe choose one instead of like 3. So you want to determine how many you do and which ones are worth it. Like if you're going there, if you're going to Paris, is going up the Eiffel Tower one of your bucket list activities? Now, if it is, definitely go up there. For me, I was quite happy sitting with a picnic down, sitting underneath the Eiffel Tower and just watching it from there. So determine from your trip what you want out of your trip. This is going to make your experience more customized to you. So you're going to be able to really determine what you want out of this trip and not have to spend money just deciding that, oh, I should go here. Oh, someone told me I should go here. This is your trip. Take it the way that you want to take it. So when you are traveling, and now that traveling is coming up, so we're slowly starting to open up travel, and I'm super excited to start traveling again. But there are some things that are going to be more concerned now, especially around COVID-19. So you want to make sure that you know what is going on with COVID-19 before you leave and everything else around that, so you have a really safe and fun trip still. So what you want to do is you want to download, I made this guide for you, I made a guide to how to travel during COVID-19. Now you can download it from there. It's free to you. I'll also put the link down in the comments as well. So download that, and it gives you a bunch of checklists and all the information that you'll need before you take a trip during COVID-19. This is still going to be with us probably for the next year. So you want to make sure that you are really aware of what entails going on a trip during this time, so you're not losing out on money and you are having a great experience. So I hope you liked my little talk tonight. I hope you learned a few things on how to save some money during your travels. If you did, definitely leave a comment. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to answer them. And until next time, I hope you have a great night. Talk to you later. Bye.